Hi, everyone. We will get started shortly. In the meantime, I'll just describe the slides for anybody who is blind or low vision or tuning in on the phone. So this is created by Change Catalyst, changecatalyst.co. And we have the logo here. Change Catalyst is in black and red with a circle and an arrow. Thank you to First Tech Federal Credit Union for their sponsorship of this episode today. The logo is in black on a white background. And our ASL interpretation is by Interpreter Now, www.interpreter-now.com, with Sarika and Ruby today. Again, a logo in black, all letters with white background. And yes, please, thanks, Emily, for introducing yourselves. Please, you all, please introduce yourselves as we get started here. We have a code of conduct: be kind, practice radical inclusion. You can find out more at ally.cc/COC. And the podcast is available on all your favorite podcast platforms. And this slide has me holding a coffee cup and a computer in front of me with a grid of lots of diverse faces of the many folks that have joined us over the last almost 2 years. You can find my book at melindabriannaepler.com. My book is How to Be an Ally. There's an image of the book with several colors and on a orange background, and it says it's the right thing to do, it's the just thing to do, plus it's good for business and makes us happier. Next event live is February 1st, 2022. You can learn more about our panelists following us on social media at Change Catalysts, on Twitter and Facebook, and Tech Inclusion on Instagram. And here we are with season 6. ally.cc for you can find more information, and our hashtag is Allyship Podcast. Hello, Christina and Emily and Jerica, Sophia, thank you for introducing yourselves. I appreciate you all. And lastly, this last slide is redefining normal in the remote/hybrid workplace with Lakeisha Middleton, Katie Harris, and Melinda Brianna Epler, myself. And it has photos of all of us, and we will describe ourselves in just a moment. All right, let's get started. Well, hello everyone. Happy 2022. Welcome to our Change Catalyst live series and the Leading with Empathy and Allyship show, where we have deep, real conversations about how we can be more inclusive in our workplaces and communities. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. Hi, Madeline, good to see you. I'm Melinda Brianna Epler, author of How to Be an Ally and founder and CEO of Change Catalyst, where we build inclusive innovation through training, consulting, coaching, and events. So as we move into a new era of remote and hybrid workplaces, rather than struggling to return to normal, we can contribute to redefining normal in a way that is more inclusive and equitable. So today we have here Lakeisha Middleton, founder of the Good Success Network, and Katie Harris, director and HRBP at Intuit. We'll discuss how we build diversity, equity, and inclusion in hybrid and remote workplaces and the unique opportunities we have for redefining what that work looks like and feels like. We'll also share what we're learning from the Great Resignation, or lots of different terms out there: Great Reevaluation, Great Migration, Great Reimagining. Whatever you call it, there is a major transition happening. So we'll discuss how we might address this, reduce stress and burnout, and create meaningful work. So before we dive in, a few things here. Many thanks to First Tech Federal Credit Union for sponsoring this episode. And on screen are our ASL interpreters, Sarika and Ruby, from our partner Interpreter Now, interpreter-now.com. We are also being live captioned by Maggie at White Coat Captioning, so you can turn on or off captioning and adjust them by going to the bottom of your screen and clicking that option. And lastly, we have a code of conduct. If you have any, so just be kind, be radically inclusive. And if you have any questions We'll definitely leave time at the end for Q&A. And in the meantime, please say what you're thinking in the chat. It definitely helps and makes a big difference in our understanding of what's resonating for you. So please do share in the chat and continue to introduce yourselves. Hello, Pamela and Katie. All right, so Katie and Lakeisha, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Melinda. Glad to be here today.
Yeah, glad to have you here today. So we always start by a bit of your story. So if you could say just a bit about your story, where did you grow up and how did you come to do the work you do? And briefly, what is that work? Lakeisha, why don't we start with you?
Absolutely. So I'm Lakeisha Middleton, and I grew up in a very small town called Utahville, South Carolina, which is about 40 minutes from Charleston, if you've ever been to Charleston. And how I got into the work that I'm doing, I've been in tech a little over 20 years. And I remember even as a child, I'm aging myself a little, but when we had the apples with the big floppy disk, I instantly loved computers. And I remember saying, I want to be a businesswoman and I'm going to carry a briefcase to work every day and I'm going to work with computers. And I had no idea what that looked like, but lo and behold, that actually happened. So I've been in tech in various capacities, but most recently on the people and process side. I really like doing work to bring the people and the processes together and to create inclusive environments for everyone, right? So I work with my clients currently to do just that with everything going on in the world, making sure that the employees are taken care of, that they feel like they have a meaning of belonging and really just a psychologically safe workplace, and that companies really are doing what they can for their employees to have just a great workplace and a productive workplace. So that's a little about me, and I'm just really glad to be here today.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Katie, how about you?
Well, thank you. Thanks again for having us here. So I grew up a little bit in Pennsylvania on the East Coast and then moved to California. So I went from horseback riding to surfing and swimming pretty quickly as I got into the California world. But I always wanted to be a teacher, and that's finally been able to come full circle. But I got into the tech world and was a product manager for 20 years working on innovations. And one thing I loved was just working with the team and making sure everyone on the team could contribute to the innovation. And what I found was the more everyone felt safe sharing their ideas, the better results we had for our customers. And about 10 years ago, I got into mindfulness as a way to help me feel more calm every day, but also I found it helped with my creativity and my connections with people at work. And I thought, wow, this is so helpful. I want to blend my two worlds of business and mindfulness in some way. And so I started hanging out with the HR people because they seemed to have it going on. And eventually I got into talent development and now HR business partner, where I spend my time coaching leaders on how to be mindful, innovative, inclusive leaders.
Awesome, cool. Thanks for sharing, both of you. So over the last, it's been almost 2 years that we've kind of been in the remote world, most of us, not all of us, most of us. And I've heard many times over the last almost 2 years, people talk about how they can't wait to get back to normal. And yet the old normal wasn't really working for everyone. And we're seeing, for example, that many people with disabilities have been asking for years to work remotely, only to be told it wasn't possible to accommodate it. And now we have suddenly figured it out, right? And also several of my Black friends have said they aren't ready to go back to the office because they aren't ready for those regular microaggressions and exclusions again. Not that they're not happening in the remote place, but they're less ubiquitous. Also, trans, non-binary, and genderqueer folks are talking about increased psychological safety in the remote workplace as well. So, as we transition our workplaces into that new future, what could a new normal look like? What is that? What can that feel like? Neither of you jump in.
Sure. Yeah, I can kind of talk about what we're doing and our philosophy at the Intuit level, and then some of the things I've seen just in our team levels of what we've been doing. That all of the benefits you talk about, there also a big difference I've seen is just a real leveling of the playing field, and if done intentionally, really helping people who are maybe normally introverted to actually get their benefits of maybe thoughtfulness and maybe slower thinking, but more potential analysis than maybe some of the team members who are more extroverted always had been, and in an in-person meeting. So, doing things like working on documents offline first, and having everybody have a chance to contribute with written words and more time for thinking, and then people can be more prepared. So we're finding that with like more people in a room now can contribute. Being intentional with breakout rooms so everybody can have a voice. It's been a real benefit. But all of the decisions we're making at an Intuit level we're talking about going forward, and it's not going backwards. It's going forward to a world where it's really invested in making connections. We're really invested in innovation and inclusivity, and we have so many more opportunities to hire in different locations that will increase that diversity in all dimensions. And so, just such a big benefit looking forward as opposed to going backward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Katie on the looking forward part, right? So when we talk about getting back to normal, it's more like just getting to normal, right? So whatever normal is looking like today, tomorrow, next year. And I think the forward part is the key. I think that, I've said this before, but, the pandemic really magnified a lot of things for a lot of companies and individuals, where if there were looming issues before in the workplace, in the processes and things of that nature, those definitely came to light. So I think that it gave an opportunity for companies to step up or not, but the companies that stepped up really benefited because, just provided a safe place for their employees to be honest about where they were, if they were struggling with even working remote, because a lot of people started working remote for the first time in their lives, right? So I think leading with empathy, which is always good, and just really asking important questions as we all navigate this, and doing what's best for all parties involved. Because the way the workforce is headed, it is no longer a place where, it's I hire you and you should be just grateful to have this job, right? It's like people looking for partnerships. They're looking for a win-win in a place where it's like, hey, I provide these services and this value in exchange for what you give me. And we're more so walking this journey together. So I think that's a common theme that's going to continue. And I really think it's a step in the right direction, to be honest.
Yeah, so maybe we could talk about specifics, some specifics. What are the unique opportunities? And Keisha, maybe we'll start back with you. What are some of those unique opportunities that the remote and hybrid workplace provides around diversity and inclusion? How is that different? What are some of the things that companies are seeing? What are they doing that is different, that is unique, that is addressing specific needs?
Yeah, I think it's the sense of community. So I saw a rise in even online communities during the pandemic, and it just really showed how much of a need people had to belong to something that in a space where they felt safe and have the ability to be brave and really show up as their authentic selves. So companies realizing the importance of actually having that kind of community feel in the workplace is very important going forward. We've always had employee resource groups and affinity groups, but I think really reevaluating what's the value and the purpose of those groups and how they need to function going forward. I know a lot of companies are reevaluating that. And it in some ways, the being remote has leveled the playing field for some people that just the technology, right? They've launched new businesses, they've tried new things. I know a lot of us had hobbies. Like I have 2 plant babies now and they're thriving, right? So just small wins, but people created, things they might have even wanted to do for a while, just passion projects or real projects. I think it just really opened up the opportunities for a lot of people, whether they decided to go out on their own or to really thrive in their current role within their companies. And the companies that get it and are having those conversations are really seeing the benefit, I think, of just having happy employees to show up fully.
I love those examples. And I just would add things like mentorships became easier. I think it's just easy just to get on a call and not have to go somewhere or meet for coffee, but we were able to match people across locations that would never have been able to be in the mentor relationship before. And so, especially for folks who might not feel they fit into a certain mold of leadership or culture, having the mentorships across different groups and just having more people available for them has been, a really powerful thing. And we talk about those in our talent reviews. And people are just really excited now to do that, as opposed to maybe in the past, but people thought, I'm not really sure exactly why, but we have lots of volunteers now and, across different locations.
Can I ask you some more specifics? Because I know that for a lot of companies that I work with, they're struggling with mentorship as in the remote workplace. How does that look different? And how are you engaging people to do that effectively?
Yeah, we're focusing on it a lot in our talent reviews. And so, systemically in the past, talent reviews could be kind of like just trying to argue for your person's talent rating, and then that was the total of the discussion. Now what we're trying to really do is make sure that growth conversations are the majority of the discussion when you come to the talent review. So we're looking at key people and having the leader, the manager of the person come in and say, how would I utilize the rest of this leadership team to help grow this person? So what are the in-job kinds of learnings? What are the support kinds of things that we can do, like mentorship or groups or coaching that the person could have? And then what's sort of outside learning that somebody could do, training that we provide or externally. And so intentionally having that conversation and actually writing out, remember, these are the kinds of things that growth involves, because, managers are maybe not always thinking about that. And then talking about it as a leadership team and saying, growing people on our team is a team sport of managers all working together. And so people are just much more aware and visible to each other's needs on the team, and they're volunteering at a much higher rate. People are asking for help, and then we're providing resources too on, okay, well, now that you signed up, what does it mean to mentor? It doesn't mean telling your mentee everything they should do. It's asking questions, really finding out what's important to them, really finding out what they need to know about, and guiding from there. And so really being customer first with that employee.
Nice. And Lakeisha, actually, while we're on that subject, I know you are also you also work with folks on their growth and moving up in organizations. You want to talk a little bit about that, since we're kind of on that subject? What are you seeing different? What is happening differently, and how are you addressing it, or how are you coaching people to address it?
I will say this. People, I think definitely times of crises naturally does this, but people are really seeking to find value and purpose in the work that they do. And I think that the the younger generations right now were kind of born that way. But I feel like everyone's kind of coming along the curve, right? Where in times of crises, you kind of realize what's important to you. And the reality is we spend most of our waking hours with our careers. So if you're going to do that, it only makes sense that it aligns at least with your skills, your talents, but also your passion, right? Like even when Katie mentioned mindfulness, it's like wow, how do I actually mesh this into my career? More people are doing that now. And that's one of the reasons for the Great Resignation, because I think I said this, when we had our meeting before, but people aren't just, resigning and sitting at home collecting dust, right? Like they're actually leaving for better opportunities and opportunities that align better with their values and where they want to make an impact in the world. So even with the large global companies I work with, I'm very clear that the type of coach I am, I'm about making sure that as a company, what you stand for, especially in these times, and how you want to be seen from a public view, but also that your employees know that, and also that they're aligning their values and they feel it's like they're part of the company, because that also encourages belonging. When there's a clear vision for the company that you're working for, right? And you're on board with that vision, it makes such a big difference. And the work becomes more energizing, even on the long days or the extra hours. It does not really zap your energy, right? Or stress you out if you're really in a place where you just don't feel aligned. So that's the biggest shift I'm really seeing with a lot of my coaching and just advisory with companies and individuals, is that people want alignment with their values these days.
And I think one of the things that you have told me is that you can find that alignment. You don't necessarily have to quit your job. You might find that alignment in where you are now. Do you want to talk a little bit about that and how you might do that?
Yeah. And I'm going to pass it to Katie, because Katie kind of did that. But there's some ways that you can do that is speak up, right? So I think I've been guilty of this in the past, where I didn't think that the thing that I wanted to do was available at my company, but you never know until you actually ask the question. So just actually having those important conversations and saying, hey, I'm really interested in doing this. Is there an opportunity for me to work to use those skills, to develop those skills, or to actually create a role? I know a lot of people that created DEI roles, diversity, equity, inclusion roles during the pandemic, and they were pure tech, but they have a passion for the work. So now they're mixing their love for tech and their love for diverse, equity, inclusion. So it really is about speaking up, especially if it's a company that you really enjoy working for, right? Because there's really no need to leave if you can have everything that you want there. But Katie, I'd love to hear more about how you made your pivot as well within your company.
Sure. Yeah. And I would say that it's a two-sided coin. I think it's so important for the employee to get their own clarity on their values and in the direction they want to go. And that when I'm doing coaching, the 3 questions I really like asking, and these are kind of questions that are not answerable like in any one sitting. They're sort of study yourself questions. But the first one is, what's the difference you want to make in the world? And be really clear on what's that impact and the meaning that you're going to bring to your life. And that might be in work or might be other things, but it's just like, what's your purpose? The second one is, what puts you in a state of flow? And so what are all of the environmental factors about your team and your work and your work-life balance and everything that makes you just think, don't tell anybody, but I totally would do this without anybody paying me, So what puts you in that state of flow, and really knowing that so that you can articulate that to, your manager or your potential employer. And then the third one is, what assumptions are you making that may not be true, that are keeping you from really pursuing that difference you want to make in the world, or are not putting you in that state of flow? And for me, it was similar. Like, I didn't think that a job existed that would have mindfulness and business in it, but I made it. And so it was pretty cool that that could happen with the support of the managers. But the other side of the coin is that the managers in our organizations need to be able to have those conversations and not just be all about the work and the speed of delivery. And, hopefully they can be clear on prioritization, but also have these career conversations and be able to create the space and time to ask, what do you want to do? What's the next thing? What's the furthest out thing? What's your dream job? And how can we work together to do, one of the questions was, how is upskilling part of that? That might be a stretch assignment. There were different times where I wasn't yet an HRBP, but I was running talent reviews in tandem with HRBP. So how could I kind of get exposure to see if I liked it and, just to learn about it? So there's stretch assignments, there's, temporary assignments, rotations we're working on all the time. So talking to the managers and the team about that. And then there's also, internal and external education. I got to go get my coaching certification. So that was just, another thing that talking with my manager and team, we had support for that growth because it's in line with what the business needs and what I want to do. And so how do we have that alignment? Peter asked a great question about kind of how do we get people to have that alignment and feel good about where they're going, but also have it be accretive to the business. And I would say there's nothing like goals. I mean, goals are just the most important thing, I think. And what we do at Intuit is we set out our mission and our values, make that very clear. And then we have 5 big bets about the biggest things that we're going to invest in. And then everyone in the company then has public goals of what they're contributing to in the business, and then also their development goals. So you could go in to look at our CEO or any of the CEO staff, and you could see, oh, they're working on, clearer communication or better prioritization or anything like that. So everybody can support each other in that. And so that we call that our alignment system. And the whole purpose is to make sure everyone is working together, toward the same goal.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a great question from Peter. I think there's maybe another Peter from our live audience. For those of you who are listening, there's another piece of that, which is recognizing what's going on in people's lives, and I think there's a few things that happen in the remote workplace. One is that the boundaries are more fluid between home life and work life, right? And also that a lot of us are going through a lot, given that we're in a pandemic, given that there is racial and gender injustice happening, and so many other things that are just happening in life. And I think that there's another layer of that too, of how do we have those hard conversations and still get the work done. I'll just open that up to both of you.
Yeah, I think that it's getting back to psychological safety, right? And as a leader in your company, and leader doesn't have to be title, it's just like, as someone who leads in your company, do your employees feel safe raising their hand and saying, I need help? Or saying, I'm having this personal issue that's going on right now that either is or may affect my work performance, and I need to give you a heads up. Do they feel safe coming to you and saying that? And on the flip side, are you having those proactive conversations, just checking in, right? Just, hey, how are you doing? Like, how are you really doing? Right? We ask that question often, but we don't wait for the response, or we don't really want to know. But actually having the how are you doing conversations and letting people know that they're not going to be penalized from a performance perspective, because they're actually, life is just happening to them, right? Most people want to do the right thing. They want to show up, they want to do a good job. And it's like having those conversations and just making people know that it's okay. We're all kind of navigating this thing. And even if it wasn't a pandemic and you're going through something, you still want to be able to raise your hand and ask for help. So I think that was a big thing for, honestly, a long time in corporate as a Black woman. I didn't feel safe raising my hand and asking for help. And that's for various reasons, right? I felt like I always had to be twice as good. And I didn't have grace to make mistakes, but that was a lesson I had to learn on my own, but also through good leaders actually telling me that it's okay. Like you don't have to do that. And it was so liberating for me, but everyone doesn't have that, just that privilege, really, right? In a lot of cases. So I think being proactive about thinking, how are people really doing on your team and around you? is a good way to start.
I love that, Lakeisha. I would add that it really helps when leaders show their vulnerability and their real humanness. And so, we'll do things like after we have a break or, long weekend, we'll have a leader say, what'd you do for relaxing or for time off? Talk about what's going on in your real life situations. When we have kind of new leader sort of assimilation to the group, we'll have them share their stories. I have one of the VPs I support just shared her story that she used to be married to a man. Now she lives with a woman that she's in love with. And she just shared that just as part of her, that was her journey. And we had so many people say, thank you so much. And, like that just made me feel so comfortable with you and genuine that I could share my stories. And so when we kind of have a sense of each other's real life, then it's easier to say, oh, and my mom is sick, or my kids, need early pickup, or I'm worried about, them having to stay at home again. I don't know how to manage this. So it just having everybody see each other on that human level and having that start from the top, I think makes a big difference in the environment.
Yeah. What are some other things that we should keep in mind when it comes to remote and hybrid work and inclusion? And Katie, I know that you're really intentionally working to intentionally design that experience. Can you talk about some of the things that you're doing there?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the things, and Lakeisha mentioned this too, is that it's just so much more frequent communication and reach out, so we know how everyone's doing, and so that's managers reaching out on an individual basis to really have that connection and that real authentic conversation to see, do we have our priorities clear and manageable so you can make it through your week. Are you am I noticing that you're working past certain times during the day, so that we can have those micro conversations and connections to help everyone set boundaries. But then also at the company level, are we doing things like looking for time off for the whole company? For example, we did something called recharge days in the winter time, and then also in the summer, where people were telling it, we're noticing no one was taking their vacation time during this time off because they said, we don't have anywhere to go. So they're just working all the time. We kept encouraging them. And then the feedback was, well, the work just piles up. So it's not even, worthwhile. And so we kept hearing that feedback, and we said, well, we're going to introduce recharge days, meaning the entire company is going to be off. So we don't have that buildup. And it was so appreciated. And people had lots of realizations of, oh, I remember what it's like to not be looking at the screen for 9 hours a day, and to be able to get up and move my body, and how important that is. And so we try to have those resets pretty regularly. We've also experimented with things like no meetings after certain times, or no meetings Fridays, and things like that, where people could have chunks of time to work, because we were getting lots of feedback that now that everybody wants to try to connect all the time with a Zoom meeting, there's not enough uninterrupted time. And so how can we have zones when we all agree that, the engineering team can actually sit down and code and not be just constantly pinged by the product manager, and actually get some things done. So we've experimented with that in different groups. And our takeaway is that we should have conversations regularly about what's working for the team, what's not, and the teams should decide how they should best work together. And so when we go to hybrid and people are, some people are in person, some people aren't, we're letting the teams decide on what days they want to be together. For example, if they want to talk to customers in person, then they should do that together. If they're doing a status update, they should do that on Zoom, or better yet, on a Google Doc, because it's just informative. So we're trying to put principles in place and let the teams decide how they best collaborate.
Yeah, I really love that, Katie. And you made a couple points earlier, even around just like the introvert thing, right? So I think taking the time to really get to know people, even like their personality types and tendencies, can be helpful. Even if that's bringing in a coach to do that, or partnering with your HR and people teams, but to really to see and develop people from a lens of strength, of their strengths and what they're really good at and what their inclinations are, can be really helpful. I know there were concerns that, from a lot of people that may be introverted or just not as outspoken, that they were going to get left behind, right? During the pandemic, especially now because they are remote. So they prefer not to be around people, but they also know, well, I don't want to stay in this role forever. How do I move up? How do I make sure I'm growing, right? So I think it is important to be very intentional about your employees' career growth. Like, what's the plan, right? So just like you said, Katie, having those conversations, but being even putting a plan in place. I love your that you do the visibility around the goals. I think that's great. I worked at a company that did that, and it was such a game changer because it was literally from the top down. Everyone could see all your goals, and we were also able to put personal goals. So for example, one year of mine was, okay, I want to, get more fit and like lose a certain amount of weight. And other people would see that and they're like, oh, are you on Fitbit? Let's form like a walking group, or I'm trying this new, I tried this new workout that you may like, right? I know you like to dance, things of that nature. So it humanizes people, just like you said. And it just naturally encourages a sense of community because people find something in common that they never knew they had in common before. And it's really good to see when that things really start to mesh and that rapport starts to be built.
Yeah, when people are invested in each other, it's so powerful. And one of the things we've been doing as we kick off new teams for new projects for the coming year, one of my favorite activities is called Live, Love, Learn. And everybody just takes about 5 minutes to share 3 pictures. One is something they loved, something they learned this year, and something about where they lived. And people can disclose to whatever amount of information they want to, so you don't have to go through your whole life's journey line. And it's quick, but you get that connection, and people say, oh, me too. And I also, or I never have been. So, tell me more. And so there's just this great investment. And then the second thing we do in that is share, this is my development goal. So please give me feedback, on this area. And then people become very invested in each other's growth on the team. And you've already been established in vulnerability because you said, this is my development goal. I'm obviously not as great at this as I want to be. And so just having that vulnerability and that connection then, lays the groundwork for people then being able to say, hey, I disagree with that idea. Maybe there's a different idea for our innovation and how we're delivering for customers. It just creates that environment where maybe that introvert will say, hey, I have something more to add, or I have, something I want to start the meeting off with, because they've already, had that connection with the team.
Another piece of remote working that I'm noticing is that sometimes people are feeling isolated, they're feeling disconnected, and a lot of the things that you're talking about are ways to address that, build community, like you said, and really share different pieces of your story and enroll people in helping your growth and development. And are there any other things that people might think about in terms of this? How to bridge that isolation and build empathy?
One thing that I've noticed is that feeling of connection sometimes was very concentrated in certain locations. So like our big sites, people would feel connected, but then our team in Texas or our team in Mississauga up in Toronto, they didn't feel connected. And so now we have a more even distribution of connectivity of those teams, and so they feel more involved. And so that's been exciting to see that it's not a one way to isolation. It's been actually beneficial to some of our remote teams to just really feel much more connected. But I think it requires intentional, regular connections. And so, while we'll do things like that live, love, learn as maybe a team kickoff in the beginning, we continue making sure we do things like the first 5 minutes of a meeting are everybody share what you did this weekend that you want to share, or, how's everybody feeling today, or share something that you're proud about outside of work. So I, with one of my teams, but they're always finding out about my horseback riding, so that's what I'm proud of. And so, like it's fun. I mean, you can see like I light up when I talk about that, and they are excited to hear that. So I feel like they're my friends because we do that on a regular basis. So just taking a few minutes at the beginning of each meeting helps create that connection. And the more, the earlier each person contributes, the more likely they're going to contribute through the rest of the meeting. So the longer somebody waits to contribute, the less likely they will ever say anything in that meeting. And so just having something friendly up front actually will change the dynamic of that meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think something we haven't talked about, but I think has definitely been highlighted throughout this time also is the importance of mental health. And isolation can be like your worst enemy, right? When it comes to just managing your mental and emotional health. So I think owning our overall wellness, right? And knowing where is the line where my isolation is not really about my job, but it's something else, and I need to actually see a professional for this, right? So knowing where that line is, and I know that so many resources and even free resources have increased during the pandemic, which has been one of the, I think, the best things about everything that's going on. But knowing when, hey, I need to talk to someone before I can talk to someone, right? Like before I can feel comfortable, like actually getting acclimated in the workplace. But just knowing that it's okay. I'm so glad to see the stigma around mental health not being as bad as it was before. And I think everybody, I am so pro therapy. I think everyone should have a therapist, honestly. I have one. And, for, like I said, for the community and the culture I'm from, that was a stigma for a very long time. But you realize, and I think becoming a coach kind of opened me up to that, because I'm like, well, even coaches need coaches. So maybe a coach needs a therapist too, right? So I think just realizing that, seeing that it's okay to open yourself up to getting help in ways that you may not have gotten help before. And that's okay. Because that's where it starts, because it is a twofold thing. Even feeling like you're belonging, you have to be willing to kind of, make that first step as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And we had a whole conversation late last year about burnout, which we'll link to the show notes of this episode on our website. So we don't want to go too deep into that, but it would be great to share some thoughts in addition to that, Lakeisha, and to share some thoughts about how we might reduce stress and burnout during this time, since that is on the rise and so many people are experiencing that.
Yeah, this is always my go-to, but do more things that bring you joy. And it sounds so cliche, right? Like I say it and it sounds very like something I pull out of Oprah magazine, but it's true. So even earlier when I talked about doing energizing work, that's the whole point of doing work that aligns with your values, because it's something that actually brings you joy. It's actually physically, proven that the chemicals that it spikes in your body, it energizes you, it makes you happy, it makes you smile. Like when Katie talked about horseback riding, right? Like it made her smile. And it made me smile when she said that. I was like, oh, horseback riding, that sounds like fun. But it's the first thing people say is like, well, I don't have time. But then that's also why you're burnt out, right? So it doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be taking a stretch break, or getting 5 minutes of fresh air during the day, or watching silly videos on YouTube or TikTok, or whatever your thing is a very non-judgmental exercise. Connecting with someone you haven't talked to in a while. Just anything, but anything that sparks joy in your life, I think is a good way. And boundaries, right? Boundaries. I say my no is very strong these days, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And there's a saying that, when we say no to the things that no longer serve us, we're able to say yes to the things that do. And I think setting boundaries and really knowing it's okay to choose yourself, like to really choose you and invest in you. And and to do things that bring you joy. So I've found that is really balanced out a lot of the times that could have been really, really sad during these past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Love that, Letitia. That's just beautiful. I would add from a leader perspective, two things we're expecting all of our leaders to do is just really, really be clear about prioritization. It just cannot be, here's another thing and here's another thing and hope that people can figure it out. My joke on the no is like, I feel like a book that just says how to say no, it would be a bestseller right now, because a lot of people are A+ performers. They're like, yes, I will do everything to the top degree. And it really needs to be the leader and manager's role to guide what's most important and where are the places where it has to be A+, where it just needs to get done, so that people can have a little less stress. And then also just really role modeling and saying, I'm going to go pick up my kids at 3 o'clock. And that's why I'm either not going to be on this call or I'm going to be, just multitasking or something, but making it really clear that, everybody has a real life and that we're doing these things. We're picking up our groceries or whatever we need to be doing, so that everybody can feel like they have a right to have a balanced life too. But my number one answer here is, of course, mindfulness. One time I saw a shirt that said, whatever your problem, yoga is the answer. And I would just swap out and just make it even broader, mindfulness. But I think it's so important. And it's so easy to, do a little mindfulness practice, even at the beginning of a meeting, and just say, let's just all take 5 minutes to settle in, be aware of our breath, be aware of our body, and just how much, I even just noticed how much my own pace changes, just checking in. And you can get guided meditations on a variety of apps. I'm sure there are practitioners in your organizations that would be so willing to, share a few moments. I get invited to, kickoffs of the meetings here and there, and it's so fun. But having your own practice to just check in, there's a saying that practitioner says, I don't have enough time to practice mindfulness. How often do I really need to do it? And the monk says, however often you're doing it, double it, because if you don't have time, then that's your own perception. You need to have a little more mindfulness. So, just having some regular practice where, even if you haven't gone through a training, just bringing some attention to your breath, but also maybe, checking out trainings that are available. There's all kinds of resources available at most major hospitals for mindfulness-based stress reduction. That's a big 8-week commitment, but there's all kinds of resources available. So if anybody needs, any more resources, feel free to reach out. But it's a life-changing thing for me. I went from high-speed, constant anxiety to, really always trying to be present.
Yeah, mindfulness has been a huge practice for me as well, both meditation and yoga. And I will say that even in between meetings too, because we go from meeting to meeting, and if we just take a moment, sometimes I'll take, I only have 1 minute meditation to really just recenter and refocus and, get rid of the energy from the last meeting as I go into the next meeting, and really, really resetting for that moment. Even just 1 minute can make a big difference. I will say I use Insight Timer. It's a great app, and I've been using it since 2012, I think. So a long time. It's there's a lot there. I want to jump to, go ahead.
One just really quick thing that seems really sort of simply, like it wouldn't do anything, but a huge benefit was our whole organization and the consumer group said, we're going to start all of our meetings 5 minutes late. So everything starts at 1:05 instead of 1 o'clock. And so it just gives everybody a little chance for water, yoga, mindfulness, but just some sanity in there for 5 minutes before we start. And it's made a huge difference versus just having everything back to back. So I highly recommend that.
Yeah, I work with one of my clients does that as well. It took a little bit to get used to, but it's definitely nice. They do 5 minutes after the hour and 5 minutes before the hour. So there's 10 minutes in there. Yeah. And I want to also just acknowledge Emily's in the chat mentioned, particularly if the leaders share first, that I think it is really important if you are a manager, if you're leading a team, if you're even leading a meeting to model this. I mean, it makes a big difference in whether or not somebody else will as well. Modeling transparency, communication, mindfulness, you're sharing your own story, sharing your experience with therapy, all of those things can make a big difference in how your team shows up and whether or not they feel psychologically safe to share. There were a couple of questions here. I'm kind of scrolling through the chat. Nobody used the Q&A function, so kind of working back through the chat a bit. Kevin asked, how is upskilling, reskilling part of your growth strategy? This is addressed to Katie. Are you seeing more interest in continued ED, either traditional or MOOC? Maybe you can explain that.
You know, it's a great opportunity right now because you know, people have a little bit more time on their hands and maybe they're not traveling or going to get-togethers on the weekends as much. And so we've seen a lot of people, you know, sort of say, I want to get my MBA or my, you know, other higher degree. And so people have been adding that and they're utilizing our benefits for that. And then we also have a variety of trainings that are attached, which is really cool. Our goals system is attached to our learning system. And so if you put in there, I'm interested in, you know, leadership training or manager training, then you'll get recommended, you know, the right trainings that would support whatever you want to work on. So that's been a really great technology solution to helping people find what they need. But that can also just be, you know, manual and have that conversation of, well, what are the training opportunities internally or externally? But certainly people are, you know, super interested in that now.
Awesome. And we have one question in the Q&A from Emily. Not all leaders who lead hybrid teams are totally bought into this formation. How do you coach leaders to lean into trust?
One of the things that is happening right now is we get a lot of questions about how exactly is this going to work and how, you know, what are the logistics, like what days and hours, and then we're saying no, but like we're going to do is experiment our way into this, just like we experiment which are the best solutions with our customers. We're going to experiment on how we do this for our teams with those principles of making sure people feel connected, they're able to operate with speed, it's fostering innovation and contribution, and it's creating an inclusive and diverse environment. And so as long as we are testing against those principles, we're allowing teams to figure out what works for them. And our CEO often talks about, like, you know, on March 13th, 2020, something happened and we all started working at home and we had to figure it out and we supported each other. So we're going to do that, you know, going forward as well. And so it's a little bit of embrace the ambiguity. You don't need to have everything perfect. What we do on the first day back of hybrid is not what we're probably going to be ending up doing later. But support your team so that you're always solving for those principles as we go forward.
Keisha, anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I think also because I coach a few people that experienced the tug of war that happened in 2021, where people started going back into the office and everyone was like, absolutely not, right? A lot of people were just like, I don't want to go back. My manager is making me come back. How do I build a case? But literally, I had them to have those discussions and to build a case. So many people were more productive. I know people that got promoted during the pandemic. So it's like, why getting to the root of, right, to I think it was Emily asked that question, to to the point of trust, right? So some of us micromanage. At the core of micromanagement is a trust and control, a need for trust and control, right? So I'm really getting to the root of why do you need this person in the office, or even if it's part-time, if they're happy and they're performing very well, right, in the current situation. So I think it's challenging. It's employees also challenging their leadership and building that case if you do want to remain remote, or actually if you want to come into the office, whatever that is for you. But I think at the core of it all is trust and a need for control, and really having those honest conversations. It may be uncomfortable, but it could really pay off in the long run.
Well, we're just about
go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. We're just about out of time, but I wanted to ask one more question. And I see, Madeline, sorry, you had a couple of questions in the chat we didn't get to, so I'm going to try to merge it with my last question. Madeline asks, what small acts have you found helpful that have notable outcomes? And I will say, if you could say what action would you like people to take following this conversation? What is one small act that they can take to really have a notable outcome?
I would really encourage just that in that first 5 minutes of a meeting to have some kind of human connection, to ask a question so that everybody can contribute. That's a real human question. And I think you'll see a big difference in the ongoing contribution of the team and once you get to business topics.
Yeah. And I'd say give yourself permission to make the changes you need now if your needs have changed, right? So I'm not the same person I was even last year, right? So I think we may feel that discomfort of needing to make some sort of change, whether that's a company change, role change, just some change in work, whatever that is for you. But I think everyone just realizing that, hey, I'm not the same and I need different things now, and acknowledging that, but also seeking help where needed. It would be my biggest advice. And you can apply that wherever you need to, but I think that goes a long way across different areas of your lives.
I love that. And I think what you both touched on early on, going forward, not backward. I think those are Katie's words, but I think that's really, really important that we're moving forward, not backward. We're taking everyone with us. We're checking in with people as we move forward. We're making sure that we're moving forward in a way that is equitable and inclusive for everyone. So thank you both, Lakeisha and Katie, so much for this conversation. And
so fun to be here.
Yes, it was a pleasure. I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much, Melinda.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you all for your great questions. Thanks again to First Tech Federal Credit Union for your sponsorship. And everyone, please do take action. Please make a difference in somebody's life. And we will see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye.